Murray Finkelstein, and I've worked with them on a number of them where these were epidemiologists hired by the ministry to investigate exactly these situations. The other thing I want to mention before I start on this is we recently, this one's old, this goes back to 1996, but we recently did a breast cancer investigation a few years ago with Unifor, then CAW. And what we did is when we came in there, they had a whole list of concerns of exposures. They had 18 of them. And what we did, we could have gone through that list and said, well, this doesn't cause, it included things like drain flies. And what drain flies are, when the drain dries out, you get these little flies and things. But what happens when people are concerned about a cluster of diseases is that everything health and safety all of a sudden comes to the fore. And therefore, when these concerns are brought forward, it's a perfect prevention opportunity, not only to deal with, just the breast cancer, but everything else because people are listening, people are looking around, people are attentive to hazards, and therefore, those other 18 things we were able to deal with. The thing that we thought probably was most likely the cause of the breast cancer wasn't even on the list, which for nurses in a hospital was shift work. But we were able to address all those 18 items because there was an opportunity and people were listening. So first of all, what happened way back when? Well, at this time, they were worried about the rates of cancer in their workplace, and there was a proposal to do an epidemiological study, which was done eventually. But one of the issues was the identification of present-day exposures at GE that might cause future problems. Oh, I want to recognize Irina, who was probably did more work on this than I did, and she's here also. And so in 1995, 4 hygienists, Irina being one of them, toured the plant, and it took us a whole day to walk through all these huge buildings and 34 departments and the whole day through. And at the end of the day, they said, okay, what should we be worried about? So, how can we say? So we came back with a proposal that said, let's get a couple workers from each department and put them together in a room and get them to do what we call hazard or risk mapping, where they identify their process and identify the things they're concerned about. So what we did is over 4 days, we had 2 3-hour sessions a day with about 20 people, 3 or 4 people per department. And over the 4 days, we covered 34 departments from the 8 divisions using a risk mapping program that we developed. So the technique is to identify hazards based on workers' experience. It summarizes it in a picture form, and at the bottom is a to-do list. And you can post this in the lunchroom, and it has names and dates of who's responsible for what to have done by when. And contrast that to a great big hygiene report with lots of scientific gobbledygook that nobody reads. But so the process is, get people to think about hazards, get them to draw a picture of their workplace, put the hazards on there, rate the hazards, evaluate the controls for those hazards, and then identify which are the priority items and assign responsibilities, and then later follow up on that. So thinking about hazards, it's not just chemical hazards. It's all kinds. It's safety, chemical, ergonomic, physical hazards, biological, and psychosocial. And we were talking psychosocial in 1995. So here's an example. You have a process which receives parts, assembles them, welds them together, and then degreases them before painting, warehousing, and shipping. And here's a list of some of the hazards in each department. And then people rate them. High hazard, the sad face in red, and then orange face and things like that. People have markers. They really get into this too. How if you get them to draw their own workplace and identify the process, the beginning of, we're introducing it. By the end of the process, they're in complete control of the what's going on. Then we rate whether or not the controls are adequate or absent altogether, or we're not sure. And then from that, we develop a list of what the issues are, who's responsible, and a target date for getting it done. And lastly, after a certain amount of time, hopefully around the target date, you can check up to see if it's done. So the results, we had 34 process flow maps with the hazards on each one with 144 recommendations, and 2 years later, over 95% of the recommendations were implemented. So this is an example of one of the hazards, and you can see the red high hazard and the checks, controls working or X's not working. And this was the list of the hazards along with the needed controls. And okay, I think I'll stop there. She's saying yes. But just to say, part of this is a technique that workers can use themselves. And we did other research that I won't talk about that talks about knowledge activists, people who collect information in the workplace, in the internet, talk to people. Oh, that's where it is.
Sorry, I moved it for other people.
And we have a booklet where we put together the information from the survey and from interviews, qualitative research we did with them. But also the last half is a bunch of stories of different activists who have solved different problems that might be an inspiration to people who are interested in how to get things done and how to get things changed in the workplace. So thank you.